Right, gender and house are interesting ones because they're what we're going to call an enumerated type. They can only store, a gender can only store male or female, which can be stored in a very, very small bit, 1 bit actually, isn't it? So you could say 1 for male and 0 for female. But we also want to be able to read it well when we're looking at the database. So what we're going to say is that gender is an enumerated type, which can only hold the values that we specify when we define this table. So it can only hold male or female. Now, the database is going to save that as only one or the other, and it's going to do it in a very, very small amount of space, which is going to be useful for us. Date of birth, well, I think that's going to be a date, which is great. Now, the date format is YY dash MM dash GD, which means the first 4 characters of the year, then the dash, then the month, and then the day. And as you can see, our database over here is in the format dd dash slash mm slash YY. Now we're not going to want to have to type all of this data in the database in because we've already got it in a file. So we're going to be very clever and export our spreadsheet and then mess with it when we come to do the inserts. But one of the things we do want to do is if we're setting this to be date, we do want to have it the same format. So I'm quickly going to do that now in my spreadsheet. So I click on column E, format cells. And what am I looking for? I'm looking for a date format. And if I scroll down here, I have here a YY-MM-31. And that is exactly the same format as MySQL uses. So I'm going to click OK for that. And it's formatted my dates in the right format, which is going to help me a lot later on. Finally, house. Well, house is going to be an enumerated type as well. And in the houses, we've got the 4 houses from Harry Potter. Hufflepuff, Gryffindor, Ravenclaw, and Slytherin. So what we're saying here is that the house is going to store one of 4 values, and we're going to call those this, but the database can choose to call them whatever it wants. Now, the next thing I'm going to put in here is each of these columns. Are they allowed to be empty or not? Does it make sense to have a student without a first name or a last name or a gender? And in all of our cases, it doesn't. But for a lot of things like notes or other things like that, it might be possible, or we might be desirable for us to allow empty entries. But we're going to say not null for each of these. If we wanted it to be null, we would just say null, but we don't, so we're going not null for each of these. So what we're saying here is create a series of columns with these particular data types and do not allow them to be blank values. Right, if we insert into the student ID, one of the things MySQL can do is automatically give us the next available number, which is going to be useful if we're adding students further down the track. The command for that is auto_increment, which means when you insert something and you don't specify the student ID, give it the next available one, which is going to be really useful for us as well. Right, and then I think we've finished filling in the data for these, so we're going to put little commas at the end of each of these lines, because that's what is required. And then finally we decide that we tell it the primary key, and from memory the format is primary key student ID, and that's the last line in the create table. So, moment of truth, is it going to work when we put it into the database? Good question. I might have got this row line here the wrong format, but there's only one way to find out. So we go to demo.phpmyadmin.net/stable, and this is a place for us to play. Now when you're developing your own stuff, you probably install MySQL on your computer, but just for now, this is free and available for us to use and quite easy. It's what's called a sandbox, which means anyone can come in here and do anything with it. And at the end of the day, they delete everything and start again. So it's not secure, so it's very important for us to operate by using our schema file so that we can keep saving our work. But at the same time, it's a great place to play. So I'm going to put Demo SQL as the name of my new database, and I'm going to create a new database called Demo SQL in here. And database Demo SQL has been created. That's great. So I'm going to flick to the SQL tab because I just want to go straight to the SQL. Now I could use some of these tools, Designer, to create tables and do things like that, but I'm just going to use my create table that I've created over here, and I'm going to paste it into the SQL over here, cross my fingers and hope it works, and click go. You have an error to use near bracket. Nuts. It doesn't like that, does it? Let's see. Semicolon on the end, perhaps? You have an error in your SQL at line 9, so it really doesn't like it. Nuts. Alright, well, what if we put... Like I said, I think it's that last line, so let's just try pasting that in and putting the primary key inside brackets. It might be that it requires us to primary key in brackets. Your SQL query has been executed successfully. Lovely. So I'm going to go back to here right now before I forget, put the brackets in there. So I'm saying the primary key is this, and that's because the primary key could actually be a range of columns, a multi-column primary key, which is something we are not going to get into at this stage. Great. So I've now created my first table in here called students. So let's click on students and see what it looks like. Students. Here's the type of data. Here's my field.